is set for the Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation Breakfast Dialogue, which will hold in Lagos. The theme of the Breakfast Dialogue is Advancing Sustainable Development in Africa, the role of environmental, social, governance strategies in creating impact. Now, the event will draw luminaries from diverse sectors to tackle pivotal issues surrounding sustainable development in Africa. Since inception, the ACT Breakfast Dialogue has provided a multi-stakeholder platform to build relationships and leverage on core knowledge, skills, and assets to scale development efforts across the African continent. Joining us to discuss the work of the Foundation and this year's conversation around the Breakfast Dialogue is CEO of Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation, Osayi Alile. Great to have you and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, you?
Good, very well.
All right, well, let's get straight into it. I'd love to know what birthed the Breakfast Dialogue and this year's conversation.
With the Breakfast Dialogue, we realized, we work in the social enterprise space, and we wanted to bring people of like minds to think through processes and come up with solutions to the problems and the challenges that we face across the sector, but also to celebrate those that are doing well as well. But this year especially, we're talking about the ESG, environmental, social, and governance track, because we realize, the hunger was just a few weeks ago, and we know that it's only 50% of the world that has achieved where it's supposed to go, and 2030 is just around the corner. And but so we're asking ourselves questions now. We're saying, okay, what do we do different? How are we as social enterprises? How do we see ESG? How do we implement it? Because you can either implement it as a positive impact or negatively, and we want the sector and even the private sector to come in and think to themselves, how best can we use this to enhance what we're doing across board? And that's why we're doing this.
Fantastic. So what will the conversation focus on?
The conversation is focusing on anything that has to do with environment and social governance, but also in terms of how do you implement. A lot of times we just, the global north have been talking about this for a few years now. So we in the south are just beginning to have conversations about it. So the conversations really is going to be giving us pointers on how best to use the tracks and implement what you're doing, but for social and positive impact in the long term. And we're giving people examples, making sure that they live there, picking one or two examples that they can use and use in the community that they work with. Because when you talk about social enterprises, a lot of people look at the big players, but we have small community-based organizations in Zamfara State, in Edo State, doing work, and they're doing great work. But you want them to also measure what they're doing based on the SDGs or the ESGs, and they don't have an understanding of that, and that's what we want to do. We want to be able to showcase that this is how to do it and how best to measure it as well.
Right, and I love that you've already mentioned the various players involved. Yeah. Who exactly should attend this dialogue?
Private sector, I wanted to say we first, which is social sector, but private sector, because you need to understand what we're doing. Of course, social sector, but also the government, because they're the ones that do the policies, and once the policies are done, then we begin to implement. So we want all the three, we call them the tripod, to come in together and have this conversation. And those are the ones that we're expecting to come in tomorrow.
Now, what should participants expect if they're fortunate enough to attend this?
We want you to walk away from there with very concise to-dos. So it's for us, our dialogue is never a talk shop. It's really to-dos. A lot of people say, I took 5 things out, I'm going to go and start them. So those are the things that we want them to walk away with. But also to have an opportunity to network with other people in the sector, because you always find out a lot of community-based social enterprises, they work in silos. So we try and bring them all together. We normally have about 400 people that come into the room, but we also have it online as well. And online, of course, we have much more numbers because it's across Africa that we work in. So we have people from the different countries signing on and talking as well, and coming up with solutions online as well that we can use while we're in the hall.
And as we're talking about those to-dos, what are some of the outcomes that the continent can expect from this dialogue?
I'm hoping that we walk away. When you look at health now, we're asking ourselves, what do you look at in health in terms of governance, in terms of how you deal with people that you are kind of your clients, but they're also people that you have to measure. So we will give you very, very, very intricate ways of saying, okay, this is what you do, and these are the measurements that you have to look out for, because they are measurements that are policies now. They're not signed off yet, but there are things in the next few years that we will all have to measure ourselves against. So we want to prepare them for that so that they are also in a comfortable position, not waiting till it's almost the end, and then we are all rushing to do it like we're doing with the SDGs.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes. You've mentioned who should attend, but when is the event and how can individuals actually attend?
Fantastic. The event is tomorrow, October 5th, Thursdays at 10 a.m. It's at Oriental. But if you can't come to physically, it's online as well. Just check out on us, Act Foundation, and you'll be able to get the sign where you can get the Zoom link. And then, of course, you can join us online. I mean, I always suggest to people, once you can't come, just go online because it makes life easier for you. But I promise you, that the even online is as real as possible because we're going to have master classes where you can ask real relevant questions and there will be someone in there to answer your questions as well.
And I love that earlier you mentioned that it's not just a talk shop. Now, what are some of the follow-up activities or resources that are available after tomorrow to ensure that these processes are followed through?
Yeah, you know, with conferences, it's very short and sweet, as they say. But we always have like an aftermath of it where we have smaller groups coming in and we do quite a few programs even till the end of the year where you can now come in. And this is not just about someone talking to you, it's about you asking questions and you saying, okay, this is how I work in my state. What do I do? How do I implement these things? How do I get positive impacts? Because really everything's about measurement and monitoring these programs. It's one thing to say you do programs, another thing to measure it and monitor it. And those are the things that we're trying to push out there to our sector to understand that we don't count numbers, we count impact.
Count impact.
Yes.
But now let's talk about numbers. Is there a possibility that we might see an increase in frequency of this event?
Not the breakfast dialogue. Okay. The breakfast dialogue is once a year, but we do have programs twice a month, sometimes 3 times, depending on what the issues are. So with the sector, we look at the challenges that we are facing as a sector and say, okay, what do we do and how do we solve those problems? So sometimes we do very small programs, sometimes we do large ones, depending on what is there. But we are always asking questions. So it's based on what our constituents want that we do as well. Yes.
And just going back to the breakfast dialogue,
yes.
If you look at past editions, what are some of your personal favorite wins that you look back at and you feel, you know what, we really did well with this one?
I think one of them for me is what we call the CICs, an innovation program that we do now. When we started Breakfast Dialogue, we weren't doing it. And people were saying, we want to see innovation, because one of the first topics we talked about was innovation. How do we do things different? They wanted to see innovative ideas. So now we have a competition where people can actually send in their innovative ideas, even if they've not even started it yet. And we have winners from across Africa. It's very interesting, the winners this year, but I can't say that till tomorrow. But what we want them to do is to showcase the innovative ideas they've come up with. And once they do that, then we choose 3 or 4 organizations, but we showcase 10 of them and then talk to people about it and let people know what people are thinking about in different communities across Africa. And that's one of the things I love that the most.
I like it. I like the sound of it as well.
I do as well, but I'm also wondering, of course, you definitely have a plan, maybe a 5-year plan, a decade-long plan. What do you see this in the next 5 years?
Oh gosh, with the Breakfast Dialogue, you know, with us at Act Foundation, we are not just, we don't just give only grants, we also are supporters of the Social Enterprise Network. And we've done this for the last 6 years. And now we're in almost 8 countries across Africa. So we want to do more. We want to go into more countries. We want to work with more social enterprises. We want to push them to also collaborate and partner with others, because one thing is to do things alone, another thing is to do with others that understand what they're doing, and then because you go further with that. I mean, I can reach maybe 10,000, but when we do it with 2 or 3 organizations, we can reach another 10, 15 or 20,000. So we're pushing for more partnerships across the different countries, but we're also pushing to go into more countries as well and see how best we can do that.
And what does that footprint look like? What is your African footprint at the moment?
I mean, with Africa, I mean, I mentioned 8 countries, yes. Gambia, we're now in South Africa, in Ghana, in Rwanda. So we're across so some of these countries, now going to Congo as well. So we do have African footprint, and that's basically our major programs, which is the programs that we support. But when you talk about programs that we do like this and people come on, we have quite a number of countries coming on, because you see, with our sector, and our sector is so strong, but we also need to be able to push it out there in terms of the positivity that it's doing. A lot of times you want to hear the negative about the social sector or the NGOs or non-profits, as you will call it. But we see the amount of work that they are doing. If you go into the communities, sometimes governments can't even get to those places, but you see the non-profits are there, they're working. They have been working for even 20, 30 years, doing their own thing. But we also want to make sure that they're sustainable in the long term as well, and that their organizations, and that's why governance comes into play, that they're strong, and regardless of what investments are being given to them, in another 20, 30 years, they will still be doing even better programs than they're doing now.
Fantastic. So you mentioned 6 years, 8 countries. I hope I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. So what are the metrics that you use to determine the countries that you approach, basically, when you're looking for collaborations?
Well, we do it two ways. People actually do send us proposals. So we have a call that we do in October, which is, this month. And they send us things that are what we feel are viable based on our pillars. And our pillars are health, enterprise, environment, and leadership. So based on that, once they send us a proposal and it seems viable what we want to do, then we'll be able to work with you and then we'll partner with you. So at the moment, we have about 100 organizations that we're working with across Africa. And we've now reached over 2 million beneficiaries. And we don't count beneficiaries in terms of numbers, but in terms of impact. What are they doing? Are they doing things better in terms of health? Is malaria dropping in the community that they work with and stuff like that? And those are the things that are important to us.
Now, back to the breakfast dialogue, what are some of the things that we may not know about that people can expect with regards to the event?
Apart from the conversations, we have the masterclass, which I mentioned earlier. The masterclass is where you have an opportunity to go deeper into the conversations we've had earlier. And we have different topics, so you can choose what is viable for you at this particular time. So that's where it's always very interesting, because people will say, okay, everything you've been saying is great, but I don't understand this. But once you get into the masterclass, at least the masterclass is a conversation. It's helping you to get started, to push you to the next level and things like that. So those are the things that you expect. One of the things that you expect, of course, we're going to give an award to our CIC person. And I'm really looking forward to that, because I read the innovation that they're doing and I'm totally blown away by the things that you hear and you see. And we always go back to go and see what has happened. And we have a video of all the different innovative programs that we've had in the last few years. And you can see the testimony of we as Africans and how we provide solutions to what is important to us. And I tell people all the time, we as Africans, we must sit at the table to come up with a solution for ourselves. Nobody's going to come and save us. We have to save ourselves. We have to push ourselves out there. And that's one of the things that the Breakfast Dialogues also portrays. It pushes us as Africans to come up with solutions to our issues.
Your passion is apparent. I mean, I've been catching some vibes from you here, and it's amazing. You're doing wonderfully.
I mean, when you walk in the communities, you see what they're doing, and you understand why.
I hope I get the chance to. But I also have to ask you, is there anything that you're a little scared of in terms of challenges with? I mean, you've been at this for 6 years. By the time you clock 10, are there some things that actually make you go like, oh, am I sure I can achieve this? I
mean, there are always challenges. There's no industry that doesn't have challenges. I mean, I just mentioned the SDGs, and I'm telling you that we're just 15%. 2030 is just tomorrow. And and then the finance gap is widening. I mean, we know that we can't get enough funding to accomplish what we want to do. Those are the kind of issues that we are. And then also the challenges are increasing. And new challenges every day. We're facing things that we've never heard about or seen in the last few years. And those are the things that worry me. And think to myself that we might be facing this now, but in another 2 years, we don't know what's going to happen. You saw what happened with COVID. Nobody expected it to come. So those are the things that maybe keep me up at night and say, okay, how do we begin to walk backwards and say, okay, if this happens, how do we solve it? Or how do we manage the communities if this kind of thing, or if a health challenge happens again, how do we manage the communities that we work with? And so we're constantly telling our own social entrepreneurs as well to begin to think of the risks that are involved in what they're doing. And if something does happen, how do they manage it? So those are the things that do keep me up awake.
And just back to tomorrow's agenda, I know we've shared the overall theme of tomorrow's event, but you mentioned masterclasses, and I'm curious as to some of the topics of those masterclasses, just in case somebody is watching and they want to clock into the real topics that will be discussed in detail.
If I tell you I'm going to give you the right words for the topics, I'm going to be wrong. But I know
a broad idea.
We're going to talk about the fundamentals. So for someone that doesn't even understand what it means to say ESG, because we just throw it out there, but nobody really understands it. And then of course the next level of it, which is really now how do you implement it? So we have people that have done this over the years. One of them is a PhD holder in understands the ESGs, knows what we're supposed to be looking out for and how to measure it. So we'll have people like that in the segment. So apart from this tomorrow, we're going to have 2 or 3 other close-knit programs later, and this is going to be online on Zoom, so that they can also join us with that as well.
You are definitely superhuman, and we wish you well
Thank
regarding
you so much.
your
Thank you.
event tomorrow. CEO, Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation, Osayi Alile, thank you for your time here on News.
Thank you so much for having me.